You're listening to What's Contemporary Now, a show about culture and the people, places, and things that together make it up.
Every cup of Nespresso coffee is an invitation to transform your morning routine into a ritual you can treasure each and every day. Using the Virtuo Pup, a simple touch of the button freshly brews bold aromas and a rich, velvety crema layer for delicious cafe-quality coffee at home. Whether you enjoy your coffee hot or over ice, every sip, every morning is unforgettable. Nothing tastes like Nespresso coffee. Visit Nespresso.com or our app to explore our full range of easy-to-use machines and coffees not found anywhere else.
1Granary is described as a leading global fashion education platform and creative network, but for many it's a favorite Instagram or Substack account, as well as a source for events and periodic print publications. Their unfiltered perspective on the whims and woes of navigating the world with a creative spirit has become an industry-wide favorite and feels like an effective reminder on why youthful perspective should never be shunned. In this episode, we sit down with its editor-in-chief to discuss the catalyst behind its creation, the surprisingly small team behind what feels like an expensive offering, and why magazine editors are suddenly flocking to consultancy roles for brands.
This is Olya from 1Granary, and we're talking about what's contemporary now.
Olya, I'm so excited that we finally have the chance to have you on the show. It's been something I wanted to do for quite some time, and I know you're a very busy human, so thank you for joining us today.
Oh no, thanks so much for having me.
So 1Granary describes itself as a leading global fashion education platform and creative network. But what exactly is it and what inspired you to start it?
I think we evolved over the last 10 years so much, and there's a lot of thought process while we build it, the pivots it takes and what it is becoming. I think the initial point was lack of knowledge. It was a huge desire to learn. It was a desire to try other things, to do something with other people. Huge loneliness as being someone new in London and not knowing many people. My English actually was really bad when I started 1Granary. And I think the main motivation was a huge sense of fear. When you go to St. Martin's, I believe that if you made it to this university, your life in fashion is sorted out, right? Like you just need to pass this barrier and then you're safe. I left law school to come to London and study. It was a huge undertaking for my family. And then imagine you kind of midway on your second year and you start realizing that fashion industry is really, really different from how we imagine it, right? You start slowly unpeeling the layers of glamour of it. And it has nothing to do with what you see on a screen or read in the magazines. And I think that it was kind of like a feeling of panic. And I realized I was not the only one, right? All of my classmates, everyone who started 1Granary was actually a fashion design student in St. Martin's. We all were in this weird place where we could understand, what do you do after graduation? We saw no one getting jobs, understanding that, 80% of your classmates won't even work in the industry. And you're in this really expensive city and a really expensive university, right? We were learning, we were panicking, we were grabbing everyone we could to speak to, but then we were sharing it with everyone else around us. We didn't think anyone was reading us except our classmates or other students on the course. And then obviously it started growing because more people felt like us, but that was the initial motivation.
The audience of 1Granary has definitely expanded in recent times. I feel like there's a great deal more awareness around the general offering of the platform. It's one of the only Substacks I actually have a paid subscription to.
For us, we want to have a voice. We're quite private. Only kind of this last year, we started giving interviews and showing up. But before that, we actually never enjoyed it that much. But to have a voice, to make change, right, you need to have channels to be heard. And of course, it's so much better to own your own channels. For us, it's just channels. When we do an exhibition or a book or a magazine or a newsletter, it's all about promoting and sending the ideas that we're the most engaged at the time and things that need to reach more people.
Mm-hmm.
And then the same with our following. I think from day one, we never cared about the quantity of people that follows us. It was so much more about who was following us. We would check Katie Grant or Nick Knight, and we'd be like, this too, enough, right? We didn't need thousands at the time. Even now, because I think those are the people through which we can move things in the industry, right? We're of course really happy that it's going wider I think to have an influence, you need the right people to read you. We do feel, I think mostly in the last 2 years, there was this really big shift more in how people perceive us, or at least how vocal they became about telling that to us. Very often when we travel or with any events or dinners, everyone's excited. Everyone's like has a million thoughts and opinions about what we're doing. And that obviously like fires us up to do more. So yeah, I feel the change. I don't think I'm looking at following. I would say the change is so much more in very senior people in the industry treating us very differently, coming to us for opinions or projects or working with us, being willing to speak to us at any moment. And I think for us, that's way more valuable. How cool that you sign up for our newsletter, For me, that means a lot because I really like what you're doing. And I hope there can be like some sort of exchange, or we can somehow inspire you through what we write. I mean, that will be like the ideal outcome.
Well, it's definitely happening. And I think it comes up in a lot of different conversations and people reference different features that you guys have put out. But a huge part of what it is you offer in your role as supporters of new design talent is, of course, the network you're able to deploy in their favor. So how was it that you did build out that network so effectively?
It's a tricky one. We exist for over 10 years. I actually checked that you guys exist for ages as well, right?
Yes and no. We had a version years ago. We just came back 2 years ago. Yeah.
Okay. Because it just feels like it's same with you, right? If you start working with one person and then that experience was great, you treated them with respect. And usually the rule is that we give way more to those people than they give to us, right? If we have mentors or we do any projects, even if it's like commercial projects, the standard rule in 1Granary, we over-deliver. And I think because of that, people come back, but also people value that. I have actually a group of mentors, and every other mentor that will step in would be introduced to me by one of my mentors, and they will like really praise me or someone in my team and will just say how nice it is to work with us. And that just grew. And I think it's really important that you don't just take in this industry. It's a two-way relationship.
Well, I feel like that's true of life in general, right?
Yeah, 100%. And my experience, some people would disagree with me. I saw like crazy shocked faces sometimes when I say that, but my experience of the industry, it's filled with incredibly generous, kind people. Because, fashion has this reputation of just all the nasties working here. But I actually testify that it's not true. Like, it's so rare, if ever, that I reached out to someone for advice or help that they didn't get back.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think we always see both sides of that coin when it comes to what people say about this industry as far as the things that are wrong with it. You yourself have just said at the beginning of this conversation that the more you unearth, the more you discover requires correction. But on the flip side, it's also a space that's afforded people the luxury of pursuing their dreams and having these incredibly creative and inspiring experiences and exchanging dollars for all of those things.
Yeah, hopefully exchanging dollars for all of those things are part of it.
Those who make it, of course.
I think people very often speak about talent as something that you're just born with, when I think it's intelligence and hard work, and it's a practice that you develop. So you do need to be intelligent to have that level of work.
How would you break down what the experience of a designer receiving the support of 1Granary looks like?
We're doing it for many years, and each year we almost added a layer because we learned something, right? In the past, when we started, we all thought that press is the most important thing in the world. So we would just work on that and help with the shows and do all of the articles. And I would chase every editor in the industry. And then when we achieved that, we were like, okay, now they have these articles, but there's nothing else. They have no brand identity. They have no idea what they do. They just have this few pieces on a rail. So we're like, okay, we need to help them with that. So that's why we start introducing them to the teams. For some designers, we did their branding, their websites, kind of package them, be like, okay, you do have a brand, right? Now you can go and, join Fashionista or something else. And then after that, we were like, okay, but when you did that, you need to actually sell. Nothing matters if you don't sell. So then we would take them to Paris. We were doing partnerships with different showrooms when we would persuade them to give designers a few free seasons. So we worked with Tomorrow. There's this Italian showroom. And then setting up our showrooms, doing sales for designers. And then after that, we were like, okay, you sold, but actually that doesn't mean anything until you produce the clothes. So then it was like, okay, now we need production. And we were like, okay, so we start introducing designers to factories. I would go with them to fittings, help them there, oversee the whole process. I mean, we learned through that so much. So now we kind of reversed. We start with production, and we go to sales and kind of go the other way around. Because, for example, now if we want to help brands produce more thoughtful, sustainable product, that's additional challenge because it's too expensive for them to enter that space. Any innovation they can't afford it. So now we doing deals with different manufacturers, like partnerships, where for whatever the exchange is between us and them, right? For example, I don't know, consulting, doing marketing, or they just actually genuinely want to support, they allow those designers to come and start introducing those sustainable innovations into their brand. So yeah, there is loads and what that support can be.
It sounds pretty unlimited. I don't even understand how you guys have the bandwidth to sustain such a generous offering.
Yeah, I mean, for those, it's actually teaching, from day one. So then kind of how I was explaining to designers, holding their hand until I can let them go. Like the project we were running was called Child. And that was the idea of that. I mean, first you can't abort. So yeah, if you start, that's it. You need to be all in. Second, it's like no limit of ideas and creativity, right? That naivety of youth. But the third one is like you grow into a toddler, into a teenager, right? So then you need mom and dad less and less. But we did everything. We would write their emails for them and sign with their name. We will edit their interviews. We will teach them to speak, to present, to, do line sheets, to how to think about, I mean, it's teaching.
How large is your team?
Actually, my team is very small. It's just 6 people and 3 of them work on recruitment and 3 on editorial.
So hold on. These 6 people are responsible for the output of all of the content that we voraciously consume. And they're also responsible for everything you've just broken down in terms of how you support designers.
So mainly, I'm the one who supports the designers. So I will be working with them in the studio. And then I also sit on both recruitment. So I kind of like sit on all 3 pillars. My team usually hates the fact that we support designers because we do it pro bono. So
yeah, who's funding all of that travel in these showrooms and things?
So we did actually different things. I mean, when we go to Paris, now it obviously changed. Now it's easier for us. We're quite stable as a company, weirdly, while everyone else is shutting down. But in the past, for example, if we would do a partnership with 24/7 or Tomorrow, there were times when they would help us travel. There were times when we would just be in Paris for something else, and then I will be doing sales for designers. In the last few years, we actually paid for our own travel and sometimes helped to pay something for designers to come over. And then I actually physically will be doing sales for them. I know it sounds weird. I mean, we tried to find a business model that would work, but I think what we are getting out of it is this amazing experience that feeds everything we do, to know a problem, to identify the illness, you need to be there. Like what shocks me about media is very often they will write about showrooms. And then if you ask them, they never stepped into a showroom. They talk about production and none of them ever went and visited a single factory. Their interaction with designers is over dinner in a posh restaurant sponsored by another brand. So yeah, I see a lot of benefit of us working with these brands. And yeah, I think maybe I just wanted to have my own brand and I couldn't. So, that was my creative outlet to be like that deeply integrated into those brands.
Well, whatever the catalyst was, it's certainly working. And I think a lot of people appreciate it from all different angles, myself included, obviously. As I mentioned, I'm a voracious reader of the Substack and everything you guys put out. It also feels like a community, which is why it's so surprising, not just in terms of the bandwidth requirement, but to hear that it's only 6 people. Because the general editorial content and tone of voice that you guys put out into the world feels very much reflective of the times. And I think a lot of people have become such fans of 1Granary because they feel understood or seen, or perhaps can find advice that feels applicable to them. But we'll get into all the editorial stuff because I definitely have questions there. I do want to kind of exhaust your opinion on a few subjects that pertain directly to designers. You've just mentioned the cost involved in something like sustainability or innovation in general. Do you think that it's easier to achieve more meaningful change in fashion through a new brand or through these legacy houses?
I mean, the young brands are guinea pigs, right? And they're the marketing tool for some of the sustainability manufacturers to show a new innovation, how it's, a new material, for example, or treatment, and how it will look and be used in the creative space. And then the bigger brand might see it and potentially apply within their company. But I think what huge brands are doing now is uncomparable. Even if they don't talk about what we see, I mean, it's exciting and it's a very different scale. And also, even if you think about brands like H&M, them changing one single t-shirt will have more impact than probably the whole young designer scene in New York, London, and Paris combined in terms of amount of product that is pumped out. I think it's the big brands now that need to do the most, but also that we should be hoping that they will do their job.
Obviously, we're seeing the emergence of things like faceless creators. We have iconic stories like Martin Margiela, who sort of disappeared from existence prior to leaving his brand and such. Do you feel as though that type of visibility is paramount if you're going to be successful or sustain success? Or do you still think it's possible to kind of remain unknown behind the veneer of a brand?
I think it's possible, but it's just such a harder route to take. So I don't know if I regret or not, but we do sometimes have this discussion. We laugh about it. If I would have dressed better and had a cooler haircut and would have just go out all the time, we probably would have shortened our journey by at least a half. Everyone cares in the industry so much about themselves and how they're perceived. People are nice, but everyone's so self-conscious. They don't often look that much even what others are doing. But I mean, we in fashion, we understand the power of brand and what the brand stands for and how you present yourself. So I don't mean it in a bad way. I wish we were taught that better, right? And I wish we were taught to understand that actually that process can be quite enjoyable. I love going to events. I love being at dinners because you go in and you'll be like, oh my God, so many friends, catch up with everyone, new ideas. You can debate about something, new stories come up. But I think it took me 4 or 5 years to start going to parties. I kind of avoided it as something really scary.
What was the catalyst for that change?
It probably comes from a lot of Eastern European upbringing. It takes a lot to feel that you deserve to be in specific places or you're wanted. Kind of a mix of culture and religion, I would say. So, yeah, I always felt that you need to build yourself to be somewhere. You need to do all of this work for this many years, really bleed over it, work 7 days a week, and then you will deserve to sit at this table. Well, now I know that, no, you don't. You can just be cool and fun and someone people enjoy having a chat with. And ideally you look good and you're welcome into all of those places because, and again, I don't even say it in a bad way because you are part of the culture. You're someone that people are interested to see because you're the one who enjoys it and consumes it and reacts. So they want to have you around. So they understand your generation and people like you. And who doesn't want to have a fun person around the table,
No, absolutely. I think it boils down to, like you said numerous times during this conversation, your worldview, but also your self-view, right? Because you've just sort of described how you saw yourself in the grand scheme of things from one day to the next. And once you understood yourself to be welcome and considered and even credible, suddenly it became fun and it was no longer a situation that you were, ill at ease in. But even though you say you don't think of yourself as a magazine, you do have a print component, right? And the latest issue, This Is Not About Youth, it delves into ageism, creative management, power dynamics, and other things. But what are your views on ageism in fashion?
So if we talk about women, people, again, forget that fashion industry is so many different pockets and micro industries within it, right? But let's talk about designers. If you're a designer in a luxury studio and you're over the age of 30, you usually don't want to be in a studio at 2 a.m. because you start thinking, maybe I want a family, maybe I want a child. Even if you don't want any of that, because there's some women that don't, you might be taking care of someone else, right? The boys love being in the studio nonstop, going out and partying, right? Even if the woman actually doesn't want a family, everyone expects and assumes that she does. So then again, do you promote them? When a woman is hired for a job, they always talk about how she looks. She's chic. Oh, she's so fashionable. No one ever mentions that a man needs to be chic, that they need to wear fashion. or the brand, like you want to work for this really luxurious Paris house, you need to be able to fit into a sample and look gorgeous in it. Like, how come that's part of the job requirement? So in that way, if you look at the studios, of course, there are lots of explanations for that, but they're really, really young. Most of the studios, half, if not 80% of people there are all under the age of 30. It's very often because creative director or design director is on the younger side as well. So for example, they're 35. So they want people to be younger because no one teaches them how to manage. It's obviously cheaper. You want someone who comes with ideas, and gives your most and stays till 3 a.m. and doesn't complain because they need to find their place in the industry. And they're still so excited and pumped up about even being in those places. If you speak to most in-house designers, there's no roadmap for anyone over the age of 40. There's such a few jobs at the very top when you're design director. You pretty much 1 or 2 per house. It's as same as being creative director, right? So then what happens to everyone underneath? At some point we were where do designers after 40? I was where are they? Couldn't find any. There was a few there and some consult and then you need to start accepting jobs down because you need to keep moving. You can't just stay in one job. There are a few designers that achieve that, but usually you move every few years, right? And then there's a limit. Creatively, being a designer is same as being a football player. You move between clubs and you squeeze the most out of your talent and stamina. And then at some point you start getting tired and someone younger and stepping behind you. And the industry, I don't think it's right, but the way it's seen by everyone is it's powered by young people, by their energy and their worldview. There's this huge silver tsunami coming, but somehow we're still only thinking about what a 20-year-old one will want to wear. So yeah, there's a lot of issues why I think ageism is really, really strong in design industry, at least. And then think about young designers, why everyone says young designer all the time? Why we're not saying independent? We're trying to say independent brand, right? But when someone says young or emerging, that means someone who is 25. Every article asks how old they are. In 1Granary, we have a rule, we never mention designer's age. You straight away kind of box a person.
Well, the more descriptive boxes you check, the smaller the box of the person gets, right? Because it becomes more quantified and defined and less sort of, not ephemeral, but sort of amorphous in a way. But it's interesting to hear this perspective because I think on the flip side, where the conversation around ageism usually exists is, of course, outward-facing roles, right? So celebrities, talent, leadership roles. And I think if you do look at design as an example, everything you said is, of course, true on the inside, but on the outside, the majority of those thought leaders are over 40, right? And if you look at the speed with which this industry changes, you can also see how slowly it changes when it comes to leadership roles and the powerful figures at the top, including women, female stylists. But something that's been really interesting in the past year and change is this sort of renaissance of more seasoned women and even men actually on runways, magazine covers. There's this almost anti-ageism movement when it comes to the people that we think are cool and interesting. And I'm not sure if that's because people are celebrating something that's more established from a monoculture and less fragmented or what. But it's definitely happening in both directions by the sounds of it, because we're less ageist in certain ways, but maybe not in the ways you're talking about.
Yeah, I think whatever is on the catwalk is a scam.
Okay, what does that mean?
They try to present that there is this huge diversity, and then you go behind the scenes and realize, no, only in a photo, only when it's on the catwalk. I mean, already great. I'm pro any positive change, even if it's microscopic. But yes, sometimes it's more performative than actual, it's not disseminated throughout the companies or businesses they do or who they reward, right? I do agree that if we're not taking designers, but for example, media, a lot of my friends mentioned that it's really hard to progress, especially in newspapers, because they're kind of institutional people that are in those jobs. And actually no one in the industry can ever imagine them. Can't say we want either, because they're such iconic names and they're there for many years. But because of that, there is no move. And I was reading recently this, I think it was in New York Times or maybe in the Atlantic, it was this really interesting article about how basically boomers in the past, the average age of American university president was something like 54 years, and now it's 67. And the whole thing was about that actually, like the boomers generation, they stay in jobs and they don't want to leave because obviously they live longer, health's better, like they want to work, which is fair enough. But because they don't move, the ones after them can't progress anywhere. And it's kind of like, how do you work around that?
You've spoken about the general age of being under 30, and there's some pretty significant changes happening in the under 30 demographic when it comes to things like gender equality. Are you aware of all of those things, at least in the US?
Walk me through.
So some of my favorites, because obviously we're huge fans of women and female in power figures, but under 30, again, these are greatly correlated to the US statistics, but they are more likely to enroll and graduate from post-secondary education across major US cities. They more often than not out-earn their male peers, women under 30, which is fantastic. Globally, nearly 40% of entrepreneurs under 30 are women. The social movements, advocates for mental health, being more politically engaged when it comes to things like elections and general causes. These are all primarily female driven when it comes to people under 30, which I think is absolutely fantastic. But I'm not sure if that's something that's palpable for you yet, or what do you think?
Speaking about designers, we spend a lot of time researching this as an issue. And there is actually something we're trying to set up to help change it, but let's see if we succeed. So first of all, I just want to make it clear, like no one questions the talent of men that get these opportunities and these jobs. They are like, every time they announce a name, I would be like, I mean, it's brilliant designer, brilliant creative, brilliant communicator, right? I think some people mistook us for just like, I don't know, hating on men. No, it has nothing to do with it, right? It's more that when we speak to women, and we interviewed by this point hundreds, most of them don't even understand how do they ever get like given an opportunity to compete for these roles. Like imagine female designers who worked in luxury industry for 10, 20 years, right? And they all wonder like, how do you even find out about these roles? Like, how can you pitch for them? Like, what's the criteria? Because it's so obvious that an incredible CV and years of experience and your reputation in the industry is not the criteria. I mean, the stats you say are incredible. And actually, when you go to any design school or if you like look at design houses at junior and mid-level, it's majority women, like 60, 80% all women.
And is that something that you guys support within the system of 1Granary in terms of how you go about introducing people, making connections, putting people in particular rooms?
Yeah, there's something we want to, on a much broader scale, start. I might be calling you about it.
Love.
Yeah, we will be bringing in a lot of people. We have a plan, and I hope that will make a change.
I'm very excited. A recent newsletter actually noted that the future for editors might lie with brands rather than magazines. And you just talked about how certain designers over a certain age become consultants and kind of work in different capacities. But I really liked this particular acknowledgement of that shift that we're seeing where a lot of editors are moving into consulting with brands. Why do you think that's happening?
Money.
Okay.
But
Period.
Period.
But why is an editor from a magazine valuable as a consultant in the brand space?
I'll touch on two things. First, I will explain a little bit why money. And I think it's so much media's fault.
Okay.
I think companies like Vice, all of those, Condé Nast, everyone who produces 70 articles a day, it became quantity over quality. And the more you produce, the smaller the price becomes of each unit, right?
Mm-hmm.
You need more people. I think now when some companies are shutting down, and maybe it's a healthy thing when it comes to fashion brands and media publication, that there's a bit of like cleansing happening, restructuring. We're kind of like rethinking and rebuilding and hopefully going to something more sustainable in terms of how things operate. But we had this, 10 years, 7 years of time when it was, how do you say it in English? Drive to the ground?
Like race to the bottom?
race to the bottom, yes.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And people were paid less and less. When you find out that in some really big, in my view, publication, people are paid $28,000 to be an editor for 4 years. I mean, that's insane.
Mm-hmm.
Insane. I mean, imagine you like, everyone is jealous, you're working in this, and then you find out that like, we pay more, you know? I was like, and they're like this huge company, and then this little 1Granary company. So of course people move to brands because that is really good pay. With some of these brands, it's obviously you have this legacy and power, so you're seen and respected differently. Yes, you don't go to the shows anymore, but I think it's way more stable, the type of work you do. The value of these people in brands, I think, is actually huge because it's so much about the voice of those brands, the ideas that come out. It's understanding the audience, the customer, understanding the media space. Someone who comes from media has like a really broad overview, all of that. A lot of editors I know are really creative, so actually come up with great creative ideas, even when it's like working with a creative director on a campaign or the art direction team. And like, it's not just someone who writes a copy. So yeah, I see a lot of really talented people moving into working with brands and doing brilliant jobs there. And I think, yeah, it's a shame for the media industry, but you know, it's its own fault that it's losing their best.
Well, we are talking a lot about fashion media, which is kind of exploding in a lot of other ways. I mean, there are new podcasts opening up every other day. There's nostalgic docu-style retrospectives, even from Vogue, a brand run by Anna Wintour, who always says it's about looking forward and not backward. But 1Granary strikes a balance between storytelling and industry critique in a way. So how would you describe your brand's voice?
When I was younger, when I moved to London, and by the way, I never heard about Dazed or ID before I came to study in St. Martin's, came from like a little shell, right? I was quite intimidated by the cool factor of all of those platforms. So I always wanted 1Granary to, you know, for it to be something very different to those platforms, something that it's sort of like having a friend, a space where people could share ideas and their experiences and be very open about it. And I think how I imagine friends can be honest, right? They can celebrate someone's highs, but at the same time, they can tell a really harsh truth when it's needed, right? So I think that's the voice we strive for. I don't know, like we genuinely love fashion industry. I don't know if you can tell that from the content we produce. So our critique of it always comes from the place of care and commitment to it. Yeah, it's more like kind of being a friend. We genuinely want the fashion industry to do better. It's not about tearing anyone down, any brands or CEOs or designers or other publications. It's like lifting everyone up through those honest, difficult conversations that we're trying to have.
You guys have them beautifully. I mean, it's very well done. And I think that's what's made me personally such a big fan, but also why so many people are talking about it more often each and every day. And we can't lose you today without asking you the last and final question, which is, what is contemporary now?
Oh, that's a very tricky one, by the way. I like that you're asking it, everyone. I mean, what I thought, at least what's important for me at the moment, is that I think we live in the world which is increasingly driven by a short attention span. So for me, the most contemporary mindset that we can adopt is one of the long-term thinking. It's so much about considering not just immediate appeal of what we produce, but the lasting impact of all of our work and that effect on individuals, on communities, on the planet. So I think that true modernity lies in this long-term thinking and creating with intention and with purpose, and hopefully ensuring that whatever we make stands the test of time.
Amen.
If we succeed, God knows, at least to keep that in mind when you do anything.
Absolutely, living with intention. Thank you so much, Olya. It was an absolute pleasure, as I thought it would be.
No, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of What's Contemporary Now. A special thanks to our producer, Sasha Grinblatt. Audio post-production by Chase Coughlin with original theme music by Joseph Topmiller and Chase Coughlin of The Black Soft. and visual design by Aaron Meager and Graham Prentice. Subscribe now to be the first to catch new episodes each week, and if you've enjoyed listening, we'd love to hear from you. Leave us a review and let us know your thoughts. Your feedback helps us improve and reach more listeners like you. Follow us on Instagram and LinkedIn for additional content and join the conversation. Let us know what you think is contemporary now.